Talkopolis programming is sponsored in part by
Dev Digital, innovative software solutions.
the Vane Centre, now celebrating 10 years service in Nashville, Tennessee.
Hi guys, Kane Harrison here. Welcome to Serious Startups, where we explore the nuts and bolts of successful entrepreneurship. And we are joined by a wonderful panel as always, Monica Selby and Dave Ledgerwood. Welcome, mate. Monica.
Thanks.
We miss, John is out exploring the world of entrepreneurship as we speak, but he will be back and around. Hey, we want to talk about something that is pretty close to both you guys, and that is parenting in entrepreneurship. Now, it's a bit of a mixed bag there, I think.
Just being kind.
Just being very kind, of course. I myself, not a parent.
If you were, you would not have called it a mixed bag.
And that is true. But just from us talking off camera, it's just how the world perceives someone who is trying to be an entrepreneur or is an entrepreneur and is also a parent, and sometimes a single parent. Who wants to start?
Gosh.
You.
Well, we already started. We have kids. And
Individually, let's clear that up.
Yeah, right. Although we try to find efficiencies on childcare.
We do.
So as partners. But I don't know. Go ahead. Yeah. Dive in.
Before we started filming, I actually kind of pushed back about even talking about this because as a woman, it's already difficult being a woman in tech, and we'll talk about that, I'm sure, in some episodes. But I rarely admit to people that I'm a mom until I've known them for a long time, because I want them to know that I get shit done. I'm serious about my work, and when I lead with, and I have 3 kids, the assumption is that I'm not serious, and that my attention's split, and that I have to be home at 6, and or earlier to get dinner on the table, and like that kind of thing, and so that I'm not serious about work. And in my experience, and Ledge has had a little bit different experience, but in my experience, this isn't true for men. When men and successful men are expected to be fathers, but they're also expected to work, they're still expected to work 18-hour days, and that kind of thing.
It's so surprising to me, because I think that in the corporate world, I could see some pushback just because of the way that it always has been. People don't change their ways very often. But I would have thought in the entrepreneurship world, where there's kind of no rules. There are some rules, but there's kind of no rules.
There are so many unspoken rules.
Right, which we are going to talk about, this being one.
There's different places of that entrepreneurship thing too, right? I think that people perceive of you that you can maybe be only some kind of lifestyle entrepreneur, right? That you're never going to break out, you're never going to have the boom, the exit and all those things, because you can't work 12 hours a day. You got to go home at 4 and take your kid to karate. And
God, you're such a loser.
You have right. Well, you can't be here when we're doing the major things, right? And so we talk about mobility and access and all that stuff. Yes, it's hard all the time to be on the phone, and it's hard to, I don't want to be the guy who's sitting in karate class and not paying attention to my kid, and I'm sitting in the back and I'm texting the whole time.
Oh God, I get so much judgment on the playground
Yeah,
for being the mom on her cell phone.
Right, you sort of get looked at like, well, you're not paying attention. I was at the pool the other day, and my 2-year-old puts on his floaties and swims around, and he's cool.
That was awesome.
But I got glared at by mothers for sitting there, and watching my kid in the pool, and as if I wasn't, right in there and holding. I'm like, I know he can swim,
right?
And I've been doing this a little while, but even from adult business people in the entrepreneurial scene, it has been my experience that people sort of have this bias. Well, you can't be around, so I'm going to hire the young 20-something.
No, but you guys were also telling me, I would expect that from someone who doesn't have kids. But you're saying people who have been in exactly the same positions as you, but are not there now.
Absolutely.
And maybe had a partner raising their kids with them, and they could develop their startup.
Ledge and I are both single parents, and so we get there's a lot of judgment from, let's be honest, men who have wives that stay home and raise the kids. And I've done the stay-at-home mom thing. I know how that works too. But there's a lot of assumptions.
Well, people with adult kids, and everybody gives you the lip service of, family first. Well, you're still bombing my phone.
Right.
At 6 to 9 o'clock, like, I'm done, man.
Yeah.
I'm doing dinner all the way to bedtime, and then I might get back to you, after that, or I might just fall over and fall asleep in my own pile of drool, because I've been doing this since 5 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
Which, and the point you just made is exactly the point they're trying to make. Oh, see, you're not focused,
right?
Because you have
right,
kids.
Because you're so scattered.
But I'll be honest, and it is really hard to run multiple businesses and to have kids, and then to add the layer of single parenthood on top of that. But I literally don't know how I would work in an office and raise my kids well. Penelope Trunk, I don't know if you've heard of her, but she's a startup founder. She homeschools. She lives on this random farm in Ohio, I think Wisconsin, somewhere. And she writes a lot about this kind of thing. And she wrote a post recently about how quantity time matters more than quality time. So just being in the same space as your kids matters more than always being dialed in. And I've noticed that with my kids. Like, my kids rarely need me unless I'm on the phone, and then they very much need me.
Always. Yeah. Right.
But because they spend all day long with me, because I also homeschool my 3 kids, another fact I rarely tell people, it's rare that I have to like put everything down and dial completely in, because they know that I'm there when they.
But I mean, I think that's something that especially parents, single parents, even more entrepreneurs mixed in with that. You give that quality time to everything, so that you don't have to you haven't got time to waste.
You just have to dial in, right? You know, it's like, I'm focused right now on this
That's
thing,
exactly it. That's exactly right.
And I'll tell you, I had the experience where my 3-year-old at the time left me playing with him, went to the other room and brought me my phone and said, "Daddy, you forgot your phone." And I was like, all right, you know, like, that's a wake-up call. You know, like, that's not the way that I want to be. And I chose entrepreneurship specifically because I could have this flexibility, right?
I think the flip side of that, though, is that the children are learning that mommy and daddy don't. You're not the center of the world, and that's a healthy thing for them to learn.
Right.
Like,
also for clients,
you're the most important. It's important for clients to learn that too, and that's an important thing to learn. And I think entrepreneurship. I mean, my kids have figured out how to sell people the freeze do maps. So I mean, and that's a skill that they've picked up because they listen to me on the phone all day. They hang out with Mr. David. They hang out with Mr. John. They understand starting a business and entrepreneurship, and they also understand that as important as they are, they're not the center of the world.
Well, I mean, let's put this to the reality is you guys have to pay the bills.
Right.
I mean, that's the other part of the whole thing.
It is. I mean, you know, so I had to look at, like, given a limited number of hours per day, you know, could I get maximum bang out of being in an office and being on salary and all those things? Or could I look at how to leverage my time to a much more valuable rate, and I can bill out other people's time, and I can scale up, and I can run different startups, and I can have multiple cash flow streams. So I mean, that's a real way to plan your life and to build that up. And it took me 10 years, but you know, now it's been a good 7 years, and I live off my work. I don't report to anybody. I don't get a salary. And that's the dream, right? You know, that's where you want to be. Sometimes it's tight, sometimes it's variable, but you plan it that way.
Yeah, I think managed well. I mean, I admire both you guys, anyone that does it. And I mean, I know that your kids, monkey see, monkey do. I mean, your kids watch everything that you do.
That's right.
And so it gets to a point where these little kids turn into young adults, and then they see what mum and dad went through, mum or dad went through to get to where they are. And I think that they can learn so many of the good habits that you show by being busy and constructive. And the other cool thing I think about entrepreneurship all the time, I mean, I don't have kids, but I am getting married. And I mean, Adair, my fiance, she's like, let's set some precedents here for moving forward. And so if I have 4 hours of nothing on a Tuesday, we go and do something if we can. But if I have to work all day Sunday, then that's what I do. So I think it's just a different way of thinking.
Well,
that's exactly right.
That work week just dissolves.
What's a work week?
You know, what's a work, right? You know, like when it's challenging not to work all the time, because there's always something you could be doing to advance a client or a project or a business. And you got 7 balls in the air.
Look, I think you've hit on a very important point, is that you become an entrepreneur because you become very passionate, love what you do. A lot of people generally in their 9-to-5 work hate their jobs, and they want to forget about it and go home and cook dinner or do whatever, play with the kids. You know, so. But
I love my work.
That's exactly the thing.
I mean, I don't think this is work. I mean, I would do this, like, retire. Why? I would do this forever. You know, this is what I do, and it morphs.
So you would raise a 2-year-old and
no, I would
build
not.
these companies in forever?
You know, the beautiful thing is, you know, I'm aging, but at least he's aging too.
So let me ask you this final question. I think this is a really important question, though. the perspective that you get from being in this position, the perspective that your children give you, reminding you that you need to focus on them a little bit and that work isn't the most important thing in the world. How is that translated into the way that you look at entrepreneurship as general, some of the ventures you're involved in, and some of the people that you deal with? Because the opposite here, you could probably judge a few people by the way that they perhaps their work life and those sorts of things, but just touch on those for a little bit, how that perspective's changed you.
I don't know, I guess, yeah, you learn to value time, and you also learn that like opportunity cost is the biggest cost, right? What could I be doing with that hour that I'm not doing? Because if I'm not making a good choice for that, like if I'm at the zoo with the kids, I'm at the zoo with the kids, or I'm using the zoo for babysitting and I'm working.
Which is also totally okay.
Right, and you just sort of become, the world is your like sort of outsourced jungle of child entertainment while you also,
which is why I go to Ledge's house for dinner on a regular basis.
Right, so we just said, hey, we got to consolidate efforts here. We have 5 kids that'll play with each other. This is awesome. Let's throw some macaroni in there and put on a movie or go outside, and that works. So we can set up laptops and get 15 minutes of work done in 2 hours, and that is way better than what we were going to do.
Right.
Right. But it's a good 15 minutes. I mean, and the reality is you get good at using 15-minute blocks. So people say, oh, you can't, multitask and all that, and that's not effective. I don't have a choice. I mean, you're going to multitask.
Yeah.
So I think what I've learned is slightly more personal and less about work in particular. It's more about parenting. But first of all, I've learned compassion for other people and for what they're going through. Whereas I might have been very judgmental, like you said, about whatever their circumstances. I know that my circumstances look bad to everybody else. And so I'm doing the best I can, and so are they. But more than that, I've also become very discriminatory about who I surround myself with. Because especially as a single mother who is working, 1 million hours a day and trying to raise my 3 kids, whoever I'm working with is naturally going to intersect with my children.
Yeah.
And so it's especially close partners. And so it's very important to me that I work with men and eventually hopefully women of integrity and who share the similar values. I mean, we're not talking about a life partner here, right? Like we're my business partner, but share integrity and similar values.
It's even worse than life partner.
and care about my kids. I mean, David and John are both great role models for my 3 boys, and that's important to me. And if I were ashamed to bring them in front of my children, then that would be a red flag for me. Like, you're not somebody I need to work closely with. And so, I mean, that's kind of a strain. I don't know if anybody else would have thought of it that way, but like I said, you're working so much. My kids are with me all day. The people around me have to be good people, or you don't make the cut, I guess.
Well, it gives us the opportunity to build this company culture, right? That is just like, I don't know where everybody is all the time. I just know work gets done.
Right.
And, where are you right now? But we're always sort of on, and at least we queue up ideas, or, I'm working late, you're working late. Hey, fine, let's work late at the same time, but we don't even figure that out until that morning.
Yeah,
and
or later.
That's why you need some kind of centralized place to at least track what you're doing and kind of think about it, because it's very asynchronous. I mean, we don't all sit in the boardroom on every Monday at 9 a.m. and have our,
we should do that a little more often, though.
We talk about doing that sometimes.
That's the time wasting we're talking about, by the way.
Hey, you still exist, right?
Yeah, cool.
Yeah. We may or may not have made that call before.
Right, right. It gives you the opportunity to make better relationships and to be focused and feel not focused. But, the reality is, like, I track my productivity pretty carefully, and rescue time, I use it. It tracks everything I do, and I look at it. And every week it tells me you're in the top 90th percentile of productive people. I'm like, how is that
Congratulations.
Yeah, I mean, but
what is everyone else doing?
It doesn't feel that way. Like, how awful are
But
the
rescue time doesn't track all the, like, holding Carter while he's whining, right? Like,
No.
So,
you have to score your productivity. So if I know that was a very awful hour, I'll just call it offline. And sometimes I don't penalize myself.
I like the idea of we'll get your kids to start scoring you now. What do you think?
Right.
Let's see.
No, let's not do that.
Yeah. I say, Will, what's marketing? Go.
Yeah.
right.
Advertising. No.
Talking about ROI.
Right.
I've loved this subject, and I've loved that we've talked about it really early in serious startups, because I think that being the type of people that we are, and we love to hear. This is what, when we sat down and said, let's do this, we wanted to be completely honest with our audience, honest with each other,
stuff.
and talk about real stuff. And I think that these sorts of subjects will be broached often, and it's a really important one to talk about, and especially for you, Monica, so thank you so much. Hey guys, we've loved having you guys join us, and don't forget to follow us on @Serious Startups for Twitter. Also on the Facebook page where we post all this stuff. Comment on all the stuff if you've got questions, and please, by all means, if you want us to broach any of these important subjects like the one we have today, we'd love to talk about it. And that's pretty much it. So thank you guys again.
Thanks, Kim.
And we'll see you next time on Serious Startups.